Is Jeffrey Epstein still alive? Was the body found in his jail cell that night a fake? I believe yes, and I'm going to tell you why. We're going to go over all the facts, the ligature marks around his neck, the weird things found in his jail cell, the fact that the crime scene wasn't preserved, the weird circumstances around the cameras and the guards not doing their job. But the main thing here that we can look at is just a simple thought experiment, all right? Jeffrey Epstein was involved in intelligence agencies, the CIA, the Mossad, going back to the 1980s. At this time, he was telling people, close friends, that he worked with the CIA. He later denied that, though. But we can see that Epstein had a fake passport. It was an Austrian passport listing a Saudi Arabian address for him that had a fake name, which he used to enter several countries. At this time, he's working with Anand Khashoggi, the main architect of the Iran-Contra scandal, okay? He's also constantly applying for new passports and saying he lost his old one. The reason that you do this, okay, the reason people have multiple passports, different passports, is when you go into a country and you have all these egress stamps on your passport, they start questioning you. Why were you in France and then in Saudi Arabia and then in Iran and then in Russia? What are you doing going all around the world? You look like a spy. You look like a spook, okay? And you will get denied entry into countries if you have a passport that looks like that. So the reason Epstein had all these passports is likely because he was a CIA or Mossad agent doing CIA agent stuff. And being that he is very familiar with this world of spy games and intelligence agencies, and being that he very likely had blackmail material on people like Bill Clinton, Bill Gates, Prince Andrew, all sorts of rich, powerful, famous people, he would not have been naive enough to let himself die in that jail cell, okay? He's not a sitting duck. He's involved in intelligence agencies his entire life. He would have set up what is known as a dead man switch, all right? This blackmail material would have been sent to friends, lawyers, family, multiple people, and he would have said, if anything happens to me, release these videos, okay? And he would have told these powerful people, hey, don't try to kill me. If you do, this information about you is going to be released. The fact that this didn't happen tells me that very likely the person that died in the jail cell that night was not Jeffrey Epstein. And if you look at all the strange circumstances surrounding that death in the jail cell, I think maybe you'll come to the same conclusion, or at the very least, you'll come to the conclusion that the narrative being spun by idiots like Kash Patel, Dan Bongino, Pam Bondi is just wrong. They're just insulting our intelligence at this point. Or maybe it's like a whole WWE performance, you know, like professional wrestling. They're just putting on a show for us to give us something to talk about.
Enough was enough! And I said, let Trumpomania run wild, brother! Let Trumpomania rule again! Let Trumpomania make America great again!
I'm not really sure. What I am sure about is Epstein didn't die in that jail cell that night, and we're gonna find out why. The first reason, and I know most people are familiar with this, but many cameras in the jail cell weren't working that night. There's no exact number on how many, but I have heard as many as 9 out of the 11 cameras in Epstein's unit that he was in, the special housing unit of the Metropolitan Detention Center in New York, were not working. And of the total prison, half of the cameras were not working. This was due to a technical error that occurred just a few weeks before Epstein's death and was fixed immediately after his death. Very suspicious there. What this was the cameras would, if you looked at the video feeds on the CCTV footage, the cameras would appear to be working, but they weren't actually recording the footage. They were just displaying it, okay? And actually, that famous video that we have, you know, everyone talks about, oh, there's a minute missing from it. That video is not from right in front of his jail cell. Here's what I mean. Most people think this was his jail cell or this was his jail cell right here. No, that's not the case. Back here, you can see these stairs, which we only have about 25% visibility accessibility of the stairs, his cell was actually back in here. There's actually a whole room with like 8 jail cells back in here, and that's where Epstein was. So this wasn't his jail cell right here, and it's actually been proven that someone could walk up and down these stairs out of view of this camera. So very interesting there. Another very suspicious aspect surrounding Epstein's time in prison is the fact that originally Epstein had a cellmate named Nicholas Tartaglione, okay? And this absolute brick shithouse of a no-neck Italian allegedly tried to strangle Epstein, okay? Epstein says he was trying to extort him and tried to kill him. Epstein later recanted this and said he couldn't remember what happened. Tartaglione himself said that Epstein tried to kill himself and he tried to save him and revive him. Either way, something very suspicious and weird happened with this gigantic cellmate of his. He's actually a former police officer who was accused of murdering 4 people. I mean, just look at this fucking guy. Like, you talk about the absolute worst choice for a cellmate. I mean, when that guy walked in, Epstein must have just been like, you gotta be kidding me. At any rate, Epstein's official explanation for what happened was he tried to unalive himself. So Epstein was placed on unalive watch in the prison. This meant that he had to have a cellmate. He had to be monitored frequently. There were lots of rules that came along with him being on unalive watch, okay? He was given a new cellmate, and this cellmate was transferred out of the prison the night before Epstein allegedly unalived himself for real. He was supposed to have a new cellmate per unalive watch policy of the prison. He was supposed to get a new cellmate in, but that didn't happen. Yet another strange coincidence. Now, here is the weirdest thing surrounding Epstein's time in the jail cell before his unaliving that nobody ever talks about. I've never heard this anywhere. The only reason I found it is I actually read the 100-page report put out by the Bureau of Prisons on all the lapses around Epstein's death, okay? And this is that the prison guards broke I don't know how many Bureau of Prison rules by allowing Jeffrey Epstein to make a illegal, unrecorded, unmonitored call to some random person in Belarus. They took Epstein, put him in the shower area. They plugged a phone into the legal line. Epstein said he wanted to talk to his mom, who had been dead for 15 years. The cops dial the number Epstein gives them. They get some man on the other end. They hand the phone to Epstein, walk away, and let Jeffrey Epstein talk for 20 minutes to some random person in Belarus. I mean, come on. The reason that the guards said they let Epstein do this is because he didn't have his inmate calling card system set up and they felt bad for him or whatever, so they wanted to make sure he could make a phone call. But there were so many irregularities about this, okay? First of all, the person that dialed the phone for Epstein, they gave him the phone, and then his shift ended. So the guy's like, here's the phone, Mr. Epstein. Oop. Time to clock out. Doop, 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 doop. And he leaves, and then some new people come in, and they don't go check on Epstein. And later on, the guard was like, oh, yeah, well, you know, Epstein did say he was going to talk to his mom, and when I called the number, a guy picked up the phone, so maybe I should have asked some questions there, but... And then the fact that the call was not recorded. Inmate phone calls are supposed to be recorded, okay? You're in prison. They record your phone calls. They record your conversations with everyone except your lawyer. And that is why the prison guards plugged this phone into the legal line. They plugged it into the phone jack that is for talking to lawyers. And then they escorted Epstein into the shower. He's not even in the right spot to make a phone call. They got a really long telephone cord, plugged it in, and put him in the shower so he could have a private conversation. Inmate phone calls, I read this Bureau of Prisons report. It's supposed to be recorded. It's supposed to be on speakerphone. There's supposed to be COs, guards present. None of that happened. Like the amount of rule breaking by these guards is just insane. And nothing even happened to these guards, by the way. They got interviewed by the Bureau of Prisons, and then it was just like, okay, well, whatever. No, they broke a shit ton of rules, and they should be in prison. They should be questioned why they let this happen. But Guys, if you're finding this information interesting, please like the video, please subscribe to the channel. I promise you this shit is not easy to dig up. It takes a very long time to read all this stuff, and I try to be as honest as possible and not just be super sensational like a lot of content creators, so your support really helps me in that way. The next major irregularity around Epstein's time in prison is the fact that the guards didn't check on him like they were supposed to throughout the night, all right? These are night guards at a prison. There is not much going on. The only thing that they have to do is make rounds. Otherwise, they're just sitting at the guard station, scrolling on their phones, reading stuff on the internet, okay? All they have to do is walk around and check and make sure prisoners are in their cells. They were supposed to check on Epstein like every 30 minutes or something to make sure he wasn't unaliving himself because he was on unalive watch. They didn't do this, and then they falsified the records saying that they did. So that's another pretty major thing that happened that, kind of gets glossed over quite a bit. Next, we're going to look at this note that was found in Epstein's jail cell after he had unalived himself. This guy up here above me, his name is Dr. G. He runs the YouTube channel Dr. G Explains. He does a lot of really good Epstein content, but he's going to, he translated this note here from Epstein's scratchy handwriting, and we're going to look at the most damning part of it. Now, it's important to know what I think this is. If you read that Bureau of Prisons report, it was reported that Epstein spent hours and like 10 hours a day in the lawyer room talking to his lawyers. Okay, he was basically just constantly meeting with his lawyers throughout his entire time in the Metropolitan Detention Center. So I believe that this note here was notes that he had scribbled down when talking to his lawyer. All right, keep that in mind, and we're going to see what Dr. G here has to say about one very interesting section of this.
Where it says red notice, and they put equals EXT. Now, if you don't know what a red notice is, that's an alert that Interpol puts out if there is a fugitive on the loose. If there's someone that is internationally wanted, a red notice notifies agencies that if this person is found, then you extradite them back to the country where they are being looked for. So that's why it says red notice equals EXT. So if there's a red notice out for him, then he will be set up for extradition. That was my first clue that if we're looking at all of this in context, that he was planning on getting out of the country. That was his goal by writing all of this down.
Very interesting there that likely during these meetings with his legal team, they are discussing what happens if a Interpol red notice gets put out on a wanted fugitive and how extraditions work and this and that. Keep in mind, okay, Epstein's a billionaire, all right? Why was he allowed to make that illegal unrecorded phone call? Because he bribed the guards, very likely. Prison officers, COs, do not make a lot of money, okay? It's not hard to bribe them. How do you think prisoners get drugs and cell phones and chicken wings in prison?
50 got done, 23 items, you know what I'm saying? You feel me? 2 for 25 all day.
Next, we're going to be looking at a couple clips from a YouTuber known as Lauren the Mortician. All right, here is Miss Lauren looking awfully beautiful, and she's going to tell us why some pictures taken after Epstein's apparent unaliving just don't make sense, okay? Keep in mind, what this woman does all day long is deal with dead people. She sees dead bodies, she sees people that have unalived themselves in all different manners. And in this clip, she talks about how the marks on Epstein's neck do not line up with someone who has unalived himself in that hanging manner. Let's listen.
You have to picture the gravity of the situation, literally, okay? When someone leans forward into that position, gravity pulls downward on the body and then upward on the material. You following me? The mark or the wound, right? It doesn't just sit straight across the middle of the neck. It tracks upward, it climbs, and it moves towards the point of suspension. Often you'll see it like angling up behind the ear, up toward the jawline, because the body is pulling against it. That upward movement is extremely common. That is what I've seen. That's what we see. I almost wish I could take my hands and I don't even know Like, you would see it. When I look at that image that Jeffrey Epstein's brother provided in that interview, what stands out to me is that the marking appears more mid-neck and pretty much horizontal, right? It doesn't present with that strong upward tracking that I am used to seeing in cases where someone has leaned forward into a suspension point. There even appears to be what looks like a secondary pattern behind it. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it looks that way. Almost like a layered compression.
This would be in addition to the fact that there was a bone broken in Epstein's neck that normally does not get broken when somebody hangs themselves. Usually this happens when someone's neck is compressed by force. Not to say that this bone can't be broken when somebody hangs themselves, but it only happens about 25% of the time, so just kind of interesting there. All right, let's listen to another clip of Lauren the Mortician. This time she's going to be talking about Epstein's mouth not being open after he's dead.
So when I saw this, the very first thing I noticed wasn't the weird looking table he's lying on. It wasn't his body positioning. It was actually the mouth area, his mouth. This is one of those things that families are always kind of shocked by because no one really talks about it. But when someone dies, every muscle in their body relaxes, all of it, including your jaw. And when the jaw relaxes and someone is lying on their back, gravity takes over and the mouth opens, not dramatically, just naturally. So naturally, in fact, that at the funeral home, we don't just hope the mouth stays closed. We actually have to physically close it, and we have a few different techniques on how to do that, but we'll have to talk about that in another video. That's not poetic, that's not optional, that's anatomy. There are techniques for it because without intervention, it will not stay shut. Have you ever been sleeping in the middle of the night and your mouth just pops open? You can feel that your mouth has popped open and you've been inhaling through your mouth, so your mouth is all dry and scratchy. It happens when you die too, because it just relaxes. You're gonna be thinking about me when you wake up in the middle of the night and you slept with your mouth open. You're gonna be like, oh, Lauren, why? So when I see an individual like Jeffrey Epstein laying flat on his back with his mouth naturally closed, no tape, no visual support, no tension, my brain immediately goes, okay, well, the muscle tone is still there. And muscle tone does not exist in a deceased individual. And this is one of those little details. I know it's little, but it's a big detail. And people don't realize that because movies, when you watch movies and they suddenly pass away, movies lie to us. Television lies to us. Dead people on screen always look peaceful, mouth closed, perfect, calm. I always think of Snow White. She looked beautiful, right? Her mouth is just perfectly closed. But that's not reality. Reality is gravity. Reality is relaxation. Reality is the body doing exactly what physics tells it to do. So right out the gate, before I even look at anything else, that closed mouth tells me I am not looking at a deceased person. And once I clock that, I move on to the next thing. Because the mouth isn't the only part of the body that gives this away. The eyes are next, and those are loud. After death, dehydration starts almost immediately. It does not wait. It does not care. The eyes are one of the first places that you can actually see it. The surface of the eyeball starts to dry out. The corneas lose that wet, reflective look. The eyes flatten and they dull. Dehydration is not my friend in the funeral home. It's one of the very first things we are constantly fighting. In this photo though, the eyes are still moist. Are those tears? Are his eyes leaking? I don't know, but they definitely look full and hydrated and puffy in a way that suggests fluid is still being regulated in the body. That is not what I expect to see in someone who is deceased.
Now, I just want to point out that this woman isn't just some random person off the street telling you her opinion. She is a bona fide mortician. She sees dead people. She sees dead bodies all day long. So she's very aware when something doesn't make sense. And these things around Epstein's body and his death, the marks around his neck, his mouth, his eyes, don't make sense to her. Important to note too that in Epstein's jail cell, after he was found, the guards and the medical personnel completely contaminated the crime scene. They moved stuff around. They cut the rope down off of his neck. They moved it. They didn't place evidence markers around where everything was. They moved everything in the jail cell around and completely contaminated the crime scene. So any evidence of somebody else being in there or some foul play could have potentially been corrupted. this goes against the Bureau of Prisons procedures. It goes against the police procedures of what they're supposed to do in a situation like this. So any investigation that would happen about this jail cell after Epstein's death is just completely ruined. The FBI didn't show up until 7 hours after Epstein had been found, so no proper investigation could have been done. Also very weird to note too, an hour before the mainstream media had reported Jeffrey Epstein's death, so nobody on the internet knows about this. An anonymous user on 4chan posted that that he had seen Jeffrey Epstein being wheeled out of the prison in a wheelchair and into a unmarked black van with no plates, driven by a person in a military uniform. This van didn't sign in or out, and they thought it was very odd because usually a judge has to sign an order to release somebody on the weekends. The post ended by the guy saying, "Guys, I'm literally shaking right now, but I think they switched him out." Now, it's important to note that this could be a bit of sensationalism. There were people that knew Epstein was dead before it had been reported in by the media. The people at the prison knew. The people in the ambulance knew. The people at the hospital knew. But this was actually investigated by the FBI. In the Epstein files, they subpoenaed 4chan to get the IP address of the person who posted this. Now, the actual IP address is redacted in the DOJ document, but in that same document, they requested bank records from a guy named Roberto Grijalva, who is a lieutenant at the Metropolitan Detention Center. So a lot of people speculate that this Reddit post was made by Roberto. Very interesting. Digging into the more sensational side of this argument, we have people who compare his nose or his ear in his death photos to pictures of when he's alive. It's important to note that when you see stuff like this, a lot of the times images can be depending on the angle or the lighting or the age of the person when they are taken, can look pretty different. I really don't like these arguments. You see them on X posts, or you see them on TikToks or shorts all the time, people pointing things out. Oh, they switched this person out, whatever. While that stuff can happen, you can have body doubles come out there. You know, for instance, there was a body double of Joe Biden's that was like 6 inches taller than the real Biden and walked with a perfect walk when the real Joe Biden, you know, shuffled around like an old man. There are real body doubles out there that politicians use. But, you know, I think we need to kind of get away from just taking pictures of someone when they were, 25 and comparing it to when they're 50 and going, "Oh, look, they switched this person out." I mean, it's just kind of dumb, okay? And one thing that really gets me about this conspiracy space online is, you guys need to understand this. It's so easy to put misinformation out there and make it seem credible. And there's so many people that just want to believe, like flat earth, for instance. Like, people just want to believe that. And so you just put something out there and people will click on it. And the more sensational, the more outrageous the claim, the better it does. But you're just spreading misinformation. And that's why I really hope you guys appreciate what I do, because I'm really trying to give you guys true, accurate information that I genuinely believe. Like, if I research something and I find it to be bullshit, I don't put it out there. I feel like that's very disingenuous. You're just like the mainstream media when you do that. But along those same lines, people say that Jeffrey Epstein was playing Fortnite in 2023. The basis for this argument is his YouTube username, which we can see him getting a receipt in his emails, was Little Saint Jeff. Somebody with that same Fortnite username was playing Fortnite in 2023. There's also a receipt in Epstein's emails for a V-Buck purchase several years ago, and people, put all this together and say Epstein was, clapping people on Fortnite in 2023. I've looked at the Epstein files a lot. There's absolutely zero evidence that Epstein played Fortnite. If he did buy V-Bucks, it was likely for one of his younger female companions who wanted to play Fortnite. I don't believe Epstein was out there hopping out of the battle bus with the rest of us. But a bit of a stretch, but just kind of an interesting thing there. I'd really like to know what you guys think happened with Epstein. Let me know down below. If you enjoyed the video, please like it. Please subscribe to the channel. We'll see you on the next one.